One is the restructuring of the street department. One is a small restructure in the sanitation department. And then finally, a look at the 2019 budget. Finley, are you in here? Before Finley gets started, let me say a few things. I asked Finley to look at restructuring his department for several reasons. One, you know, we passed our new sales tax, and he's going to be very busy resurfacing streets and rebuilding streets. But we're also going to start concentrating on drainage issues, which we already have. I think some of you know some of the areas we've cleaned out in 2018. We're going to continue that in 2019. And then sidewalks, especially in some of our older neighborhoods where our sidewalks have deteriorated. We're going to start that in earnest as well in 2019. And there's a long-range reason for that. As a city, as we look forward to public transportation, walkability will figure greatly into that. So we're looking not only short-term, fix it where folks can walk on it, but long-term where we can look at public transportation. There's a couple of things I really want to point out tonight. I want everyone to be very clear on this. The restructure of the street department money will not come from any of the new sales tax receipt, zero, and it'll actually save us around $20,000 annually. And also, finally, if you guys approve this tonight, this new structure, they will not receive a 2% raise on top of this in January 1. So other than that, that's my take on it and how Finley got to this point. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Finley, and then you guys can ask him questions if you see fit.
As the mayor said, the goal of this restructuring is to reorganize our department in order to allow us to more effectively perform specific and expanded duties as our city grows. The included memos, you have details on each goal of this restructuring, but I'd like to address a few key items that the mayor already mentioned a few of these. And the first, as he said, is that this restructuring affects the new street sales tax in no way. The second is that the personnel changes that are important to this restructuring are proposed via ordinance, the ordinance that's on page A7 of your agenda tonight.
Not like you.
The 2019 budget ordinance that's also on tonight's agenda includes no proposed reclassifications or changes to personnel in the street engineering department in any way. And the reason for that is so that the 2019 budget and this proposed restructuring can be considered separately. Any cost of, as the mayor said, any cost of living increases that are included in the 2019 budget will not affect the proposed restructuring. And as he said, the proposed restructuring defunds 3 authorized positions for 2019, which would result, by my calculations may be wrong, I'd have to defer to Tyler for the exact number, but I calculated overall savings to the street fund of over $30,000. I've handed out a proposed flow chart to show really like what I said, what we're trying to do is streamline the department to result in titles that allow us to effectively match the jobs and duties that we're attempting to do. Like I said, the memo that you have, it details these points. I don't want to labor this point, so at this point, I'm going to turn it over for questions.
So in looking at this, the ones that are in gray are the ones we're not going to fill in 2019.
When we're not going to fund.
Okay. Fund or fill, yeah, okay.
How many people with engineering tickets do we have on staff now?
Right now, including myself, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Is that enough to handle the load that we anticipate that we're going to have next year? Because with sales tax money coming in, we're going to be doing, I hope, a bunch of street work next year.
No, it is not. I have 2 vacancies, and they are funded in the
Very good. Thank you.
And we've worked diligently to hire some engineers.
And this is a no.
It's a hard group to compete with wage-wise.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't look at it. Hey, Finley, on the traffic engineer, I know that bump up in pay went up pretty substantial. Is that, are they taking over more duties to warrant that pay bump?
Yes, ma'am. The traffic engineer position as it stands on the current pay grid is not really doesn't really oversee a section. If you look at the org chart, you can see that the traffic engineer oversees really all of the traffic engineering section. As it stands on the current pay grid, that's not really true for the traffic engineer. Part of what I tried to do was create another position between myself and the engineers that exist right now, that are promoted into. So there's creating a city engineer position, and I created a traffic engineer position adjacent to that. The city engineer would oversee the engineers that do roadway design, and the traffic engineer would oversee signal design and all of the traffic engineering and all of that group.
Finley, you said we currently have 2 vacancies in the engineering. What specific departments or specific disciplines are we lacking? Those 2? What are those 2?
We have 2 engineering vacancies, but we have currently about 10 vacancies in the department.
Okay. How long have those 2 engineering vacancies been around? Roughly. Okay, and that's what I thought your answer was going to be. I think our street department does an amazing job with the resources that they have. As bad as some people think traffic might be, it's actually a whole lot better than it could be. And we've got lots of plans in place to make it better. Traffic is one of the foremost concerns of a lot of people in town, and it's one thing that we can certainly address. It's just on a side note, it's interesting when Scott Bennett from the Highway Department spoke at the recent chamber deal. He mentioned, that in state government, they are really the only department where money solves their problems. They can fix every road in the state if they had money. Same with Conway. But regardless, I think if keeping these 2 positions vacant so long is certainly hurting, I think, your department some. It's kind of limiting what we're able to do as a city. We have some new funding to build some roads. We need the people to be able to do it. I know you mentioned that it's competitive salaries to try to get them here, but we need to work to try to get those salary levels competitive so we can hire somebody. Having 2 vacancies that long is really not acceptable, in my opinion. We need to do what we need to do to get those filled. So I would ask you all to really study and figure out what it is we need to pay, and let's see about finding a way to do that.
Finley and I had an engineer that both of us knew who's very talented, and we both went out to eat with him, talked separately with him to try to bring him over to the city, and we were just $70,000 short of what he's making where he is now, and Finley and I couldn't buy enough cheeseburger and French fries to cover that.
Yeah.
So it is. The salary is the tough part with the engineers.
Yeah. Well, again, 70,000 is maybe on the high side there, but surely we can figure out a way to do a little bit better to figure out how to get some of those positions filled.
Yeah, that was the difference between what he was making and what we were paying.
I fully understand. God, if nothing else, combine these 2 and take the money from the 2 and just hire 1. Leave 1 fully vacant. But we need to get those, at least one of them filled.
I agree.
Mayor, this isn't going to open up a can of worms with other departments wanting to restructure or to rethink their salary.
I think that we're probably doing pretty well in some of our other departments. Yeah, I'd be less than honest, Mary, if I didn't think it would cause a little bit, but we'll have to do the same thing there as we're doing here. But Finley's money is not general fund money.
I understand.
And I am really increasing the workload for the street department in 2019. I've increased it significantly in 2018, but even more so in 2019.
Yeah. I remember Cheryl at one point had come and wanted to do raises for her people
Yeah.
because her money was separate from the pot too, but was told that you know,
Yeah.
we weren't able to do that because it wouldn't be fair to the other departments as well. So,
That-
I mean, that's just something that I just remember a few years back it being said.
Yeah.
But-
There's always that possibility and likelihood, but it would have to come before this body as well.
Yeah.
Finley, if you were gonna hire somebody, could you do, let me ask it another way. Could you do with a
As what?
outside vendor coming in and providing a service, if you had very specific things that you needed them to do, design a street, design a drainage system, design whatever it is that they need to be designing, could we farm that out to somebody?
We do it all the time with Garber.
Some
and
are
Craft
just
Consult.
disarray, you know, the streets are, so.
And obviously, we're not gonna be able to pay $150,000 or $160,000 for an engineer. I mean, it's just,
You know, but I understand.
I don't see
there is
that we can.
classification.
We just approved a contract with Garber for, how much was it? I think about $700,000 to design. Yeah.
And is that something that if we had somebody on staff, that's what they would do?
Yeah.
Well, that's the sort of thing we do. I think if I filled both of those positions, maybe I could have done that in-house. With just one, no, I need that, but with both of them, perhaps.
And the engineering cost was 70 what?
700,000.
How much was the engineering cost?
The engineering, forgive me, that was for engineering and inspection. Engineering was about half of that.
$350,000?
Yeah, I think that's about right.
Y'all are in the wrong business.
Yeah,
I'm
no
just
doubt.
telling you right now.
So if we
Stay.
were to fill these two positions, can we cut back on some of that?
Which two is it, the two?
The
engineering?
Your two
engineering
vacant ones,
positions, if we
yeah.
get them where you can hire some
Um,
people, can we cut back on some of that farming out?
If we hired both of them, potentially.
And to a tune of how much would their salary, I mean, what are you thinking salary-wise for those two positions each?
I think they're in the ordinance.
Well, they probably are. I mean, I just want publicly say,
Both of those positions that I've created, I have the ability to hire somebody actually, either at or higher than that rate of pay right now. This body passed an ordinance creating certificate pay for engineers a couple of years ago. But I have a desire to create the titles of city engineer and traffic engineer, so I'm actually stealing that highest certificate pay and eliminating it to create those two titles, so that it's no longer true that somebody can certificate their way up into that highest level anymore. Now they have to be promoted into it, so that I have a
More
promoted
of-
title for city engineer, traffic engineer. So it's actually not true that you're creating that rate of pay anymore. It's already there. Does that make sense?
yeah,
Okay.
Well, it boils down to this. If we've got work that needs to be engineered, if we don't have anybody on staff to do it, we're going to outsource it. So we're going to spend the money.
Yep.
It's just whether or not we put them on staff or we outsource it. And, it might actually be a better strategy to outsource it. I mean, we'd have to really look even closer. I'm sure you have. But, yeah, if we're outsourcing and getting done, then you don't need those two positions. When we hire those two positions, you don't need the outsourcing. It's one or the other.
If you look at the engineering scale,
something's going down.
traffic engineer grows it a little bit because there's an existing
These two are
kind
really
of outdated
going down.
traffic engineer salary scale that I honestly don't use anymore. But because the city bill says traffic engineer, that's the one that gets the grab. But I would never hire
Well,
somebody.
this is what it
I wouldn't hire a
was.
traffic engineer at
It was
that rate.
83, now it's 77.
But
This is a new position,
the
so.
rates of pay that I have for civil engineer, those are actually going down as a result of this one. It's not up.
Yeah, that's what we're.
So how do we expect to get anybody?
If we're going down in pay.
I just think it makes sense to be able to have a city engineer and a traffic engineer. Those are titles that I think make sense for the future of the department.
The flip side between, using an outside like Garver or some other third party, well, I think everyone would agree that Garver does fine work. When you've got a third party involved, you're at their mercy a lot of times on a lot of things. We've got a great relationship with Garver, so don't get me wrong, but when somebody's on your payroll, you got a little more stick over how much work they do and how quickly they do it. And so there's advantages to that as well.
And we do have some issues that come up that require immediate concentration.
Yeah. Well, I know you've looked over it over and over and over, but continue to look at it and figure out whether or not you think it's better to keep outsourcing to Garver or to fill these positions or to combine those two into one, get the money from the two and hire one and leave the other one unfunded and unfilled. But
I'll be clear. I would hire any qualified person.
all
I
right.
had a conversation with somebody in the highway department the other day and made it clear to him that he was not my hiring, but he just makes it money.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Finley? Thank you, Finley. Mr. Joe,
Wait, oh,
I'm sorry.
That's all
he
right.
wasn't.
No, come on.
I was just gonna ask him what salary was he talking about? The guy you had to talk with in the highway department.
What's that?
How much money was that guy talking about? The one you talked to at the highway department, you said you'd hire.
We didn't talk numbers, but I have a pretty good idea of what he makes, and he knows what I make, and I'm pretty sure he makes more than me.
Yeah.
So that's the.
So you would hire him with the rate that he's getting paid now? Is that what you've told him?
Well, I don't have the ability to hire him.
I mean, but that's what you would suggest, all right?
Don't make it more than him.
No, I wasn't suggesting that. I was suggesting that if I hired him, he'd get a pay cut.
Oh, okay. That's what I was
He
trying to
wouldn't
find
make more
out.
than the director.
Well, I was just trying to find out. He said he'd hire him if he'd come. I was just trying to figure out what he's doing.
Yeah.
I just like
I
to
don't
know.
think he's gonna take a pay.
Well, I don't know. You never know. He might be a team player.
Good evening.
We're running into some similar issues with outsourcing. So this year, and we're not talking about it, this year we ran with about half staff. We've got 8 positions, we've got 4 mechanics.
Wow.
It's into different things to recruit folks, provide tools, a decent tool set, costs $20,000 to $30,000. We're providing a tool set. It's a decent tool set, not quite to that level. It's a pretty good tool set. Change their work schedules to 410, try to make it a little more desirable. And we've also been contacting technical schools, local technical schools, plastic tech, school board, which we haven't had any success. We've got 2 mechanics right now that have been with us a good amount of time, and the other 2 are fairly new. I'd say they've been with us, one of them's been. We're just not getting any applications that are remotely qualified. Very dangerous, working with heavy equipment. Working conditions are not ideal, at times if a piece of heavy equipment breaks down in the landfill,
Wow.
it's not a real desirable work environment sometimes. What we proposed was based on the 2018 municipal league's salary survey. It's not quite to the level we'd like it to be, but we think it's reasonable. Probably have need to adjust others' salaries to recent vote on right now, this mechanics it has increased our outsourcing.
Are y'all working on the police fleet as well,
No.
besides, okay, that's not included in that. Yeah.
So it sounds
I
like
agree.
this is for equipment work only, is that right?
It's, yeah, well, right now, we've got 29 heavy trucks, 20 pieces of heavy equipment.
So he just asked him for 45. Just for mechanics.
Yeah. Yeah. He said he needs to look at others, but it's just mechanics.
This is all of our rolling stock.
What's the number one, is anybody trying to get the job, or you can't find anybody that wants the job, or?
We'll get applications, but, we'll get people at Academy Sports that
Oh.
never turn around.
Don't we? Yeah.
Really, that's, part of it is these positions have become skilled positions. Electrical mechanic is dying art, really. These guys have to go out there with a laptop, and they've got no computer systems.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just, I don't know, I worked on my son's Dodge truck the other day. I'm pretty proud of myself.
What warrants someone to be a senior mechanic? So many years experience or what?
It's really based on experience, and I'd have to look at his job description to.
But you only have one of those now, or two?
Actually, we have the 4 positions. Right now, we've got 6 senior mechanics and 2 regular mechanic positions. We can't get anybody qualified for the regular mechanic position.
Wow.
So what we'd like to do is we can get the salary up slightly on the senior mechanic position. Someone that is qualified, train up.
So how much more of an increase would you need to attract some people?
So the way we have it figured right now,
Each one, I'm talking.
70,675 per year to our budget.
70,000.
And I think this year we had a little over $30,000 surplus. And we have areas that we can adjust that to accommodate.
What's a senior mechanic? What are the wages now?
It is $34,020.
Yeah, that's not enough.
From 34.
That's why we can't get anybody.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And then the supervisor is,
Think that would get them here?
whatever increase it is, it'll be a wash at least.
I think it would be more appealing. Like I said, we do provide tools. Ways we can make the job more powerful.
What's a supervisor wages?
We're currently at
40,000?
It just has senior mechanic. I don't see any other wages.
Y'all have any other questions for Mr. Hopper? Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Got to keep the trucks rolling.
Yeah, we got
We
to.
do, we got, and
That's
then we'll
enough,
be
right?
getting calls about that if it's not.
Yeah.
Just saying, we don't hear complaints about the
Sanitation.
sanitation department, and then we got, we don't need to
trucks
start
break
here
down.
either.
Exactly.
Next, we'll talk about the budget the last half of the meeting here at 5:30. I would like to read a statement, which I will repeat at the council meeting, should you all allow me to move forward. As you all are aware, last week, there was some misinformation or lack of information that was published last week concerning the 2019 budget. We have a balanced budget in 2019. No services were cut or reduced. No positions were cut. Our sales tax is up 4%. Our permit revenues are up. Our economy as a city is healthy and growing. Our new pension contributions went up $445,000, but the plan is no longer projected to go broke for the foreseeable future, and the funding ratio is projected to remain steady at 35% for the next 10 years. It was going down to 16% in 10 years with no change. Our health benefit went up 8%, but is affordable as compared to the marketplace. We were able to partner with Conway Corporation on our current city hall, thus giving us two good anchors to go along with a thriving downtown. We purchased the federal building and recently signed another contract to extend the lease with the U.S. Postal Service. And we bought this building without any bond issues and without any loans from anyone. We paid off the remaining $1.4 million of our $3 million loan from the sanitation early, thus saving us some interest. And when it was mentioned that the cuts were necessary, that was our first budget meeting with department heads. And Mr. Hawkins and Mr. Ledbetter, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about here. Mayor David Kinley always called that the Cadillac. Remember, Andy? He called that, and that was if it was a perfect world and we could all have exactly everything we wanted. And then we came back to the real budget and the real numbers. And the Cadillac was a good thing because it let us see where we need to be in the future. You know, it let department heads, and I was a department head at the time, you know, well, if it were a perfect world, yeah, we could use 4 new pumpers this year and a new ladder truck. But that's if everything were perfect. And that's what the first cuts were. And it somehow got out that we were making all these drastic cuts. Well, no. Anyway, when it was mentioned that the cuts were necessary, that was our first budget meeting. And instead, I've already made that comment about Mayor Kinley, but instead everyone worked together to create a budget that serves the people of Conway, allows us to help our employees, and those are the folks who are the face of the city and the folks that deserve a raise. So I think after, I know that I talked, I think, to each one of you because you had some concerns, but we are very healthy, and we've got great department heads, and we have a good council, and things look good going forward. So I wanted to let everyone know that, yeah, we did. We made some cuts, but it's cuts that y'all would have made too. But we're doing fine. So that being said, we can open the floor up and discuss the budget. Any questions you have?
Well, real quick, that's the same way Tab did it for 18 years. He has department heads. What do you need?
Yeah.
In a perfect
Right.
world. And then, you know, if we can swing it, great. If
Find a
not,
way.
ask again
Yep.
next time. So that's the way y'all do it.
Mr. Winningham, you're up. Y'all have any questions for Mr. Winningham or myself about the budget?
Did a good job on it.
And I would like to brag on the department heads, and I would like to brag on Tyler. They worked long and hard and explained some new things to me. I learned a lot. I learn a lot every year in doing the budget, and I appreciate all the hard work that everybody's done.
This is the time for questions?
Yes, sir.
I sat in Mr. Winningham's office for a while this afternoon, and we discussed the 4%, 4 to 4.5% sales tax over our estimate from January 1 that we're going to have. And that's somewhere between, what did I figure out, $760,000 and $850,000. And that's about what it's going to take to renovate the 1111 building. So without having to dip into any funds, we could renovate the building with our excess sales tax money from this year, not have to borrow any money, not have to go into debt to do that. And that's just one option I'd throw on the table right now. Mr. Winningham did tell me about a loan that we have on, refresh my memory. It's the renovation of the current city hall.
Well, it was the energy saving
Yeah.
project that we took out, replacing light fixtures, eaves on the windows to keep the sun off. We've got about 5 years left on it, and about $450,000 or so is what it would take to pay that off.
So there's some options out here for us
Out
to
there.
take a look at. But the good news is we don't have to take on any additional debt to do any of this.
We did add one new position citywide. That was in code enforcement. Mr. Clausen and I are working on a plan to really we've got some real issues in code enforcement we have to address. Some of it will be coming before y'all probably in the very near future. But code enforcement's done a really good job, and I'll take the blame for only having 2 people in there, Mr. Jones. I know you're not going to let me forget that.
Did I mention that you took somebody out of the
But I didn't think you'd let me forget it. But code enforcement is one area where we can use a little bit more help. So that's one position I did add.
Well, and I'd say the bang for the buck in that position is well worth it.
Worth
I mean, they're good jobs, but I mean, what we get in return for that is well more than we pay for it. Keeping things cleaned up, because if you let a problem fester, it just creates more problems. So money well spent in that regard.
Well, we've got a plan in place, and I've kind of presented a rough outline of what I would like to see in kind of a nuisance abatement program to really help on the criminal side and also just the code side, as well as A&P Commission. I think we need a little bit more help there, a little more attention that could really make us more efficient.
Any other questions for myself or Mr. Winningham? Preferably Mr. Winningham, but if you have any questions for me, I'll ask them too.
Yeah, I got a few for you after.
Oh, no.
After the meeting.
Okay. If there are no more questions, we'll adjourn until 6:30. Thank you, Mr. Winningham. agenda. Any corrections, changes, or comments?
Make a motion to approve.
Second?
We have a motion in a second to approve the minutes as submitted. Any further questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0. We're going to break from the usual for just a minute. Brian Patrick, I have tried to convince Brian Patrick on 7 or 8 occasions to let us throw a little party for him, to let us recognize him, to do a story for the Democrat Gazette, the Log Cabin Democrat. And in Brian's very humble, kind way, he's always said, "No, I just want to ride off in the sunset." And even the council, Brian, has asked me to do something for you, and every time I ask you, it's the same answer: "No, I just want to ride off into the sunset." I would like to say a few things about Brian, and then Steve Hurd is going to come up and say a few words. I've been with the city since 1981. I've had a chance to work with a lot of different department heads, a lot of different people. I can honestly say I've never worked with someone who is as humble, who has absolutely no agenda, who does not retaliate, and who does not hold a grudge, other than Brian Patrick. Brian is just a gem of a person. I've really never met anyone like you, Brian. Most of the time when I'm mad and red-faced, you're just plain old calm Brian, but and I've seen folks that are just really, really upset, and Brian could always explain it in his way without talking down to anyone and remaining very humble. And when it was over, he didn't hold a grudge. If you came back to him the next week, he was on to the next set of business. So anyway, we've got a plaque to present Brian, and then Steve, I think you would like to say a few words. And Brian, anytime you want to throw a get down, we'll throw you one. It's just quite simple, Brian, just like you did think. It says, presenting Brian Patrick, appreciation of 20 years of dedicated service to the city of Conway, Arkansas, presented December 20th, 2018. And I promise you, Brian, I'm truly going to miss you.
We are.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Yep.
Yeah.
for sure.
This is kind of weird. The plaque says what I was going to say, and you said what I was going to say. So I'm Steve Hurd. I'm currently chairman of the Historic District Commission here in Conway. Been involved in that since the beginning. The beginning, we had no staff. I was staff, and the chairman, the architect, whatever I was need to be. Brian came along, got assigned this for better or worse. Took to it like a fish in water, and has been amazing to bring us up to speed with being a proper commission with the guidelines. Everything we've got was Brian did it. So I can't thank him enough. And like I said, it's just that level. We'd have some wackadoodles come before us, and y'all have never seen that here, I know, but come before us in the commission, and all nice people. But and he was always a level head that calmed them down before they came to us or helped us work things out. And it's just, again, his time and effort was invaluable to us. So anyway, thank you, Brian. And I've got a cold, so don't. But yeah, thank y'all for everything.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to say something too. I didn't know people were going to get to talk, or I would have prepared a little bit more. But listen, I started working with Brian several years ago when I came to the city attorney's office. I hadn't learned more from anyone else. I've never been more impressed with anyone else. He's been very, very patient and professional and kind to me. Man, I'm going to miss you. You made my job a lot easier. It was always good to be able to run to you when I had a question because you always had the answer, and you were always right. So, yeah, I'm going to be you. Don't change it. Just don't change it. So anyway, I really appreciate everything you've done for me. Like I said, you've made me grow in my profession and learn to appreciate everything that you've done for me in the city.
Would any of the council like to say anything?
I don't remember a time that you were not here. So how long have you been doing this? Well, that's just about the time
Yeah, it
I've
was
been
Bill
around.
Pope before him.
And just take a look around at Conway and take a look at that the changes that he's made, I mean, we don't think about it all the time, but the design review board that you did, or development review board in 2008, kind of was a game changer for us. It put a lot of things on the map. If you drive into the A's parking lot now, we take it for granted that there are trees there. When we drive into the Kroger parking lot, and we take it for granted that the trees were there, but they weren't always going to be there. And when you came along and made some changes and things, I appreciate the way you've made Conway look. Roundabouts, bike lanes. I mean, it's a neat deal. Thank you.
I'm really going to miss you so much. You're always there when I need to ask a question, and I've never gotten a complaint ever. And I've had people say, he was just so helpful and so kind. I mean, that's usually always a response I get back from people, so I appreciate you so much.
Well, my only thing is, who in the world are we getting to replace him? Seriously, because
We had to hire 2 people to
I
replace
can
him.
believe that because when he was here, we have questions that we had no clue about. He always
Always had the
right
answer.
there and laid it out for us. So it's going to be strange not having somebody with the knowledge you got, man. I'm serious.
Mm-hmm.
You say it's 2 people. I hope they have a clue.
They do.
Okay.
But Brian's
I'm not trying to knock-
Brian's irreplaceable.
I'm not trying to knock the people, but I just know the job he did.
Yeah, I mean, to sum up what Andy said, Conway's a better place for your service, so thank you.
Much better.
I just couldn't
And the
believe it.
patience you showed when we did all the neighborhood studies and reports and the corridor studies, and how good you were with the people who live there, and the patients, and you listened to them. And I think that's what the citizens want. And you were very understanding when I was a new council member and kind of walking us through. That's the thing. I'd probably ask the same questions in a different way, and you just answer them and put up with those. So I appreciate that, Brian.
Yep. There you go, Brian. There you go. But, I'm a little disappointed. When I announced up here that I was going to retire as fire chief, all they did was shake my hand and said, "See ya." Thank you, Brian. Anyway, I'd like to ask everyone if we could suspend the rules to move item C1, which is the budget up.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second to move suspend the rules. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, I'm going to read my statement again briefly that I read at 5:30 for the folks that are watching on TV, in case they missed it. This is concerning our budget. There was either some misinformation or lack of information last week, or just wrong information concerning the 2019 budget. I would like to say first that we have a balanced budget. No services were cut or reduced. No positions were cut. Our sales tax is up 4%. Our permit revenues are up. Our economy as a city is healthy and growing. Our new pension contributions went up $445,000, but the plan is no longer projected to go broke in the foreseeable future, and the funding ratio is projected to remain steady at 35% for the next 10 years. It was going down to 16% in 10 years had we not made the changes that we did. Our health benefit went up 8%, but is affordable as compared to the marketplace. We were able to partner with Conway Corporation on our current city hall, thus giving us 2 good anchors in downtown Conway with our thriving downtown. We purchased the federal building and recently just re-upped our lease agreement with them, with the U.S. Postal Service, which will in turn give us $60,000 a year for the next 7 years, and hopefully going forward from there. We did this without, we bought the building, the federal building, without any bond issues or without any loans. We paid off the remaining $1.4 million of our $3 million sanitation loan early, thus saving us some interest. When it was mentioned that cuts were necessary, that was to our first budget meeting with our department heads. Mayor David Kinley always called that the Cadillac budget. That was a perfect world budget. If every department head could have everything they wanted, this is what it would be. And that's where we always start. And then from there, we start cutting and whittling with our department heads and with Mr. Winningham and with Jamie to get to our working budgets. And everyone worked together to create a budget that serves the people of Conway and allows us to help all of our employees, and those are the folks who are the face of our city and the ones who work the hardest for us. So there was a little bit of misinformation that went around out there that made it look like that we were in dire straits as a city. We are not. We are very healthy. our services will continue, nothing's been cut, and everything's fine. That's pretty well it in a nutshell. So, that being said, let's talk about our budget, and if y'all are okay with our 5:30 meeting, if you have any more questions about the budget before we possibly approve it, I'll ask Mr. Winningham to come back up in case you have any questions.
I'll make a motion to waive 3 readings.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes 7-0.
There was one thing I noticed I forgot to bring up in the committee meeting. Mr. Mayor, I think you may have said that this budget does have a 2% cost of living adjustment for all full-time employees, but I think you had asked to exclude elected officials, being the mayor, city clerk, and city attorney, but they are full-time employees as well, and I would like for us to be sure and include that 2% raise for the mayor, city clerk, and city attorney in this budget as well.
I think
I
that's a
think
good
that would be
idea.
appropriate.
I don't want to get behind on their
Yeah, that's
salaries
the
too.
thing. We get
And
behind,
that's
it's a
what's
big
gonna
catch-up
happen.
later, and
Yeah,
so.
it's going to be hard.
And I think, Tyler, you give me those numbers, I think the total is $6,000 between all three of them, something like that.
Right. Thank you all.
I make a motion to adopt the ordinance,
In the emergency.
the budget, and the emergency clause,
Including the elected
including
official
the
raises.
amendment to
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt the ordinance with the emergency clause with the addition of the 3 elected positions. Any further discussion?
I don't have any further discussion, but I know Bart has said it, but publicly from the council, I would like to thank the mayor and the department heads for being so diligent in working with the budget, and I appreciate all of your input and your support that you've lended into this budget. So we appreciate you.
Yes, they work diligently and very hard, and I appreciate all of you. Mr. Garrett?
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
In the emergency clause, Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
And I have that as 51, that ordinance. Is that correct?
115.
When and what?
50?
I'm sorry, 115, yes.
Thank you, council. Next up, we have a report of our standing committees, starting with community development. Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First item here is consideration to approve the annual boards and commissions for the Planning Commission, Historic District Commission, Oak Grove Cemetery, the Conway Tree Board, the Public Art Board, the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Board, and the Airport Advisory Board. And we have those people listed there on the Planning Commission, Brian Townsend and Letitia Sanders Jones, are being asked to, or have been submitted as 5-year term members. The Historic District Commission is Emily Walter to a 3-year term, Linda Rogers, Sandy Mosley Pryor, Tony Van Pelt, or the first two, Linda Rogers and Sandy Mosley Pryor, to 5-year terms. Tony Van Pelt, a 1-year term, will serve out the remainder of Rick Green's term and then serve a full 5-year term on the Oak Grove Cemetery. The Conway Tree Board, Reed Kelly and Ryan Schock, each are selected for 3-year board terms. The Public Art Board, Rod Miller, a 1-year term, serving out the remainder of Beth Wilson Norwood's term, and then we'll have a full 4-year term after that. The Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Board, Terry Coddington, a 3-year term, William Burley, a 3-year term, and the Airport Advisory Committee, Representative Steve McGee and the infamous Fletcher Smith, to get 3-year terms. And with, yes.
Go ahead, Mr. Hawkins.
Oh, okay. And with those people being placed into nomination, I move that we accept all of those new commission members.
I need to add one correction to the Public Art Board. Mallory Salter should have also been included on that memo.
Okay.
Felicia will be getting that all out to y'all, but her term will expire in 2021. And there was some question about one of the individuals on the Oak Grove Cemetery, but after visiting with Chuck, they do live within our jurisdictional territorial jurisdiction. So,
It's actually 4
okay.
in the
Packet?
yes, there's 2 in Oak Grove Cemetery and 2 on the tree board.
Okay.
I know in the past that I think it was a Robinson Cemetery Board, we had a person that lived out of the city limits, so we didn't include them, and we had to get someone else to serve.
Okay.
I don't know I know the application says you need to live in Conway.
Okay. The one name.
Advertisement.
The one name was brought to my attention, and we checked it, and they are within our territorial jurisdiction. I did not know about the other
Yeah,
three.
three more.
So we probably, would you say, Mr. Hawkins, do we need to table this tonight and do it again in our first meeting in January?
We could do that, or we could
Or we could take the
accept the
three out.
ones that are acceptable, and
Okay.
then
Just Oak Grove Cemetery and Conway Tree Board's the only ones that I noticed.
Hey, on there, on the Oak Tree Board, it looks like Rick Wilbanks was a person nominated and Linda Rogers made the nomination.
Yeah, that's right.
So I don't know if that changed or
I don't know.
what.
I would have to talk to Felicia about that.
We'll double check and see. I think Rick should be in there instead of Linda Rogers.
Yeah, because she's the one that made the
She made the
submission.
nomination
Okay, we'll come back, we'll bring that back in January. Are you okay with this one, Mark, that lives within the territorial jurisdiction? Okay, all right. So who are the other three names we need to hold off?
Both of the tree board,
Okay,
and who's the one that lives within the jurisdiction?
that'd be Sandy Mosley.
Okay, and then Tony Van Pelt,
Okay.
On County Creek.
yeah, Candy Creek.
So we can approve all these names with the exception of Mr. Van Pelt and both of the names on the Conway Tree Board. Will that work for everyone? Okay.
And if you want to check on that Linda
Robbins.
Rogers, because I
Yeah.
think, like I said,
Yeah.
she's the one that made the nomination
all right.
Yeah.
for Rick Wilbanks, but they've got her on here.
Okay. All right, we'll take care of that, and I'll bring that back to y'all at the January meeting.
Okay,
So I'll take a motion to approve these names.
I moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the names. Any further comment? Mr. Garrett,
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
passes 7-0. Mr. Hawkins,
And the next item, Mr. Mayor, are resolutions requesting that the Faulkner County Tax Collector place some liens on property as a result of incurred expenses that the city has undergone to get property up to code. The first piece of property is at 2215 Cedar Oaks Drive. Is there an owner or representative of an owner from 2215 Cedar Oaks Drive in Conway with us tonight? Mr. Mayor, I don't see anyone, so we have a resolution to be read for this. It's Resolution R 1851.
51.
Make a motion for adoption of the resolution.
Second?
we have a motion and a second to approve this resolution for the expenses incurred by the city in the amount of $153.56. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett,
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
passes 7-0. Mr. Hawkins,
Second location, Mr. Mayor, is at 180 Skyline Drive. Is there an owner or representative of an owner from 180 Skyline Drive with us tonight? Mr. Mayor, I don't see anyone coming forward, so we have a resolution for this item. It's Resolution R 1852.
Make a motion that we adopt the resolution.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve this resolution for expenses incurred by the city. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett,
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
passes 6-0.
Third of four locations, Mr. Mayor, is at 1822 Sim Street. Is there an owner or representative of an owner from 1822 Sim Street? Mr. Mayor, I don't see anyone with us tonight, so we have a resolution for this. It's R 1853.
Make a motion for adoption of the resolution.
Second?
I have a motion and a second to approve this resolution in the amount of $165.94. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett,
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
6-0. Mr. Hawkins,
Final location in this section, Mr. Mayor, is at 1310 Arapahoe Trail. Is there an owner or representative of an owner at 1310 Arapahoe Trail? Mr. Mayor, I don't see anyone, so this will be Resolution R 1854.
Make a motion for the adoption of the resolution.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve this resolution for expenses in the amount of $177.63. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett,
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
6-0.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance accepting and appropriating donation funds for the Conway Tree Board for Arbor Day, and we have an ordinance to read for this. It's ordinance 018.
116.
116.
Make a motion that we waive the 3 readings.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett?
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes? Oops, he left. Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Passes 6-0. Mr. Hawkins?
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance accepting and appropriating funds for the Conway Historic District Commission for commissioner training. We have an ordinance for this item. It's ordinance 018-117.
Make a motion that we waive the 3 readings.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 6-0.
The motion for adoption.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett?
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Passes 6-0. Mr. Hawkins?
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is a resolution authorizing the city to obtain a matching grant from the Arkansas Department of Emergency Management for hazard mitigation assistance. We have a resolution to be read for this. It's Resolution R-1855.
Make a motion for adoption of the resolution.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this resolution to obtain a matching grant from the Arkansas Department of Emergency Management for hazard mitigation assistance. Any further discussion?
This is a large number, Mr. Mayor. I think we need to
Okay.
talk about this a little bit, if you don't mind.
Finley or Jamie?
I don't blame you, Mr. Hawkins.
Yeah.
When I see $500,000, I kind of
2, yeah.
Of course.
bow up a little bit.
Of course. This resolution is a request to seek a grant. The total grant amount is for $2 million, as it says here. Our match, our 25% match is $512,690. That is the maximum. As it was explained to us, the grant is written for the maximum that we anticipate the construction and acquisition to cost, because we can't add to it later. Really only maybe around half of that is the acquisition of the homes, and then the other cost is, and I think Jamie actually handed out a cost estimate to you guys. And the other costs are the demolition associated with the homes.
And this is for property on Sugar Creek.
That's correct.
Right off of Donaghy.
Donaghy.
On the south end of
Or
Donaghy.
that's
And
Stone Dam Creek.
exactly. And
That's
if you
correct.
talk a little bit about what it is and why we're doing this.
Sure. Initially, the grant was going to be for to improve improve the drainage in the area to mitigate flooding. But what we found when the hydraulic engineers, when the engineers that we hired to do the analysis did the hydraulics, what they realized was that actually the bridge over Donaghy was the choke point, and replacing that bridge is quite expensive, and that wasn't the only problem. There were other problems as well. And so what we figured out was that it was actually going to be cheaper to actually just acquire the homes than it would be to replace the bridge in addition to making other improvements. And the advantage of this is that then the city owns the property and can potentially use it for parkland or something else. So that's how we got here.
Thank you.
We're actually working on 2 separate issues. We're also working, Joe, on your neighborhood in the Graham Street area. Our hold back there has been that there is an identified wetlands in that area. So that has put a stop until we can get that problem rectified. We've got to identify another wetlands area somewhere in the city of Conway so that we can remove that sticker on that and place it somewhere else. So we're still working in your neighborhood too with this same group, Joe, but it's probably going to be 2019 before we hear back on that.
Have we had any contact with these homeowners? I mean, they're aware we're doing this?
They've all been contacted.
Yes, this is a voluntary program. They've all been notified, and all of these homes are on this list because they voluntarily responded and opted in.
And they can opt out at any time. And this would be the maximum amount, is that correct, Finley, in case there's any asbestos abatement or anything like that?
It's possible that the actual the award may be less than this, and it's also possible that the actual construction costs may be less than this.
Good. I am.
Any more questions? No, that's a good point, Mr. Hawkins. We've had a lot of discussions about this one.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
We have. Yeah, I have a motion and a second to approve this resolution. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett?
That'll be R 1855. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Passes 6-0. Mr. Hawkins?
Next item, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Hawkins, they've asked that this item be pulled. A6?
6 pulled.
Yes, sir. We will bring it back to this body in January.
Very good. Item 6A is pulled from the agenda. That would leave us with the last item on this portion of the agenda, an ordinance authorizing restructuring of the Street and Engineering Department. And Mr. Vinson, you did not leave, and I'm glad of that. We have an ordinance to read for this item. It is ordinance 018-118.
Make a motion, we waive the 3 readings.
Second?
Have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 6-0.
I make a motion for adoption in the emergency clause.
Second?
Okay, we're going to adopt the ordinance, but that's our fault there. We're not going to do the emergency clause at this time.
Okay.
That way it'll go into effect after
30 days.
first of the year, so there won't be any 2% raises on this.
Okay.
That correct, Finley?
That is correct.
Okay,
Okay.
so I have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett?
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Passes 6-0.
I was just going to say that the net effect of this is a reduced budget in your department
That's correct.
of about, how much?
Roughly 20,000 ballpark. Is that correct, Tyler?
For next.
20 to 30.
Don't get too excited about it.
Please.
Thank you, Finley. Thank you, Mr.
Council.
Hawkins.
Yes, indeed.
Next, we have our Public Service Committee. First up, we have consideration to approve the reassignment of the soccer complex agreement with Arkansas Rush, and Steve and Mr. Clausen will be addressing this.
Mr. Fun. See?
And you know, back to the
Handing out
budget,
the reassignment.
back to the budget thing, you really were the one with the worst, your feelings were hurt the worst, or worse,
I requested the least.
I know.
Thank you for noticing. Rush and United Soccer have had numerous meetings with us and the two organizations together, and are basically going to come into one organization, which is going to be United. And United has asked us to allow them to take over the Rush agreement. And I think Chuck's done some work on that.
I just passed out, it's kind of a simple assignment, the original lease agreement that we signed back in 2015, I believe,
so.
required, if the contract was going to be assigned, it had to be approved by this body and then in writing, so that's what this is. Basically, United's going to take over the original lease and all obligations and responsibilities therein. So it's a 15-year lease, they'll have 12 years remaining on it. I believe this will assign the contract. We may have to address some other issues, and I think you were going to talk about that.
One of the things that we're having issues with is the building foundation of the concession building and maintenance building that's located on top of that hill. It's had some wash from the drainage system around the building was run underneath the slab. And so it rusted and had been washing some of the foundation out. And we're in the process of getting with some foundation people to see what it'll take to get that fixed.
Go ahead. I got a question.
Yes, sir.
The drainage out there, I've been out there a lot here lately. I haven't been playing, but I've been watching somebody playing. It's water standing out there. Is there anything we can do to fix that? Because we had some people on the other team from the Bentonville area came to play down here, and they were complaining about our field. I mean, because the water was standing, you couldn't walk. It was hard walking to the field because water is standing like, you know. Can we do something about that? Is that something we do? Is it something they do about it?
It's something they'll do about it, but there's also some extenuating circumstances where that water goes. There's a lot of beaver dams that get built up, and we go out there and have those tore apart or blown up.
Okay, I'm just curious.
Yes, sir.
And then one of the things, I don't know how often anybody goes out there, but, Rush had the agreement, had leased the soccer park for a number of years, obviously, and they put a lot of money into those fields. They crowned them. They were having tournaments. It was growing, but United feels like they can take it kind of to another level. But again, all those responsibilities in the original lease, which is pretty favorable to the city of Conway, any improvements they do, it's still our property. We own it. We're just leasing it to them. But I don't know the numbers exactly, but it was thousands of dollars that Rush put into this property. And I know that United has the same, if not bigger, plans to complete kind of the renovations of the field, the crownings of the fields, irrigation, some of those things. And then they're required to maintain basically all of the property, but for some of the things that we discussed tonight about the concession area and the foundation of that.
So we're still, I'm looking at the original agreement that was sent to us. So we still take care of the bathrooms. It says the city of Conway will provide the following: cleaning and opening of the bathrooms.
No, we do not. They clean the
And the
bathrooms.
agreement says that we do it. Am I looking at the right thing?
Page.
It's page 73 of our packet. It says agreement between the city of Conway Parks and United Soccer Club.
That was when everybody, you'll notice there's multiple agreements in there with different organizations.
It's Exhibit 1.
That's when
Yes.
we operated the fields and maintained the fields. And when Rush took the
Exhibit
lease,
2,
they had to take those assignments along with the lease.
Right, so the way that worked out is these attachments are basically to ensure that these other organizations have access to fields when they need them. I think CBC's in there.
St.
there's
Joe.
others. And so they are guaranteed fields to practice and play on. We didn't want one organization coming in, monopolizing all the fields and basically run everybody off.
Well,
And so,
and I only bring it up because we've had an issue with the bathrooms out there. You're talking about the standing water.
so there's other portions of the agreement, I can't pull it
So
up
I'm
right
trying to
now,
find where it says
so you can
these guys have to clean the bathrooms.
Yeah,
And
so.
I can't find that.
If you can use of the premises, and then we put in here, what you're looking at is section 7, availability to other users, and that references, I think, the agreements,
Well, no,
but
no,
also
no.
maintenance.
It's under Exhibit 1, 2, and 3, and it says, "The city of Conway will provide the following in each one of those exhibits." And it says, "We will clean and open the bathrooms."
Yes, ma'am, but that was only, the reason we attached them is for the access to fields. It wasn't for any other purpose.
Okay, so where does it say that they clean and open the bathrooms?
So that would be maintenance, improvement, and repairs. All that is pretty general language, and they have to
Yeah,
do
'cause-
all of those things.
Maintenance all the fields and all that. We don't do that, do we?
Use of the premises.
The maintenance all the fields?
Well, that's what I'm saying. The stuff I'm reading here is different than what we're expecting them to do.
That's
what
because
I'm
we
trying to-
included those agreements, use agreements that we had with other organizations. into the lease agreement with Rush
Okay.
originally.
Okay, I understand now,
And
okay.
I'd have to agree with Shelley's concern on this. I have heard more complaints on the bathrooms than anything else, and I think everyone just wants to be sure that
Yeah.
someone
I
is.
just want to make sure somebody's
Yeah.
cleaning it
Yeah,
up and they
someone,
know who they're
yeah,
supposed
someone
to.
has to do that.
Yeah,
So just, if you could read section 8.
I'm going
I think
back
that-
up, yeah.
Yeah, if you go page 3, section 8, that covers it.
Okay,
So,
yeah, I understand that.
yeah.
Why the other ones are, why the other pieces are attached.
I make a motion we enter into this agreement.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the reassignment for the Centennial Soccer Park lease agreement from Rush to United. Any further any further discussion? Mr. Garrett,
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed?
6-0. And thank you, Shelley. That's,
Mhm. No, 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 'cause
I've had
we
more
got the
phone
same
calls
phone
about that
calls,
than
yeah.
anything else, yeah.
I
Next-
see it now.
You see it now?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry I couldn't
No,
find it
no, no,
immediately. I was
I just had,
worried
I
about the
was
assignment,
at the
not
bottom
the
and not
lease.
at the top,
Yeah.
so.
And Mr. Jones, I've received the same complaints you have about standing water. One, we have the same issue out there. We have silt out there that's been longstanding. We also have beaver dams out there. We've had one of the wettest seasons we've had in a while. But I hear the same complaints that you do about the foot traffic through there and having to walk through water, so. Next up, we have an ordinance accepting and appropriating insurance funds for the Parks and Recreation Department. Mr. Ibbotson.
Yes, we had a lady do some damage at the Donnelly complex, and this is just money from the insurance company to cover the costs of repairs.
Make a motion to waive the 3 readings.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 6-0.
Make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance, and I have that as 119.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
6-0.
Thank you.
Hang on, Steve. I've got your name on this one along with Jamie, both of you.
Oh, both of us. Okay.
Next up, we have an ordinance appropriating grant funds for the Laurel Park splash pad. I'm sorry. This will be the Fifth Avenue or Laurel?
Laurel Park.
Okay, all right, kind of through there. For the Laurel Park, oh, that's right, splash pads for Parks and Recreation Department. This will be the last part of our state grant.
It's actually the first part. This is going to
Okay.
straddle the years. So you'll see an ordinance almost just like this in January or February when we receive the last reimbursement.
Oh, so it does go into 2019?
Yes.
Okay, that answers it for me. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Make a motion to waive the 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 6-0.
Make a motion for adoption.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
The 018-120. Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Passes 6-0. Thank you, Mr. Iverson. Thank you, Jamie. Next up.
We work on those beavers.
Yeah, bathrooms especially. Next up, we have an ordinance appropriating grant funds for the Dave Ward Drive pedestrian overpass for the Parks and Recreation Department. Jamie will handle this.
This is a lot like the splash pad. It's just an end of the year cleanup that we have to do. So you'll see another ordinance similar to this at the beginning of next year. But these are the funds that we've received on the Dave Ward pedestrian overpass so far.
Make a motion that we waive the 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 6-0.
Make a motion for adoption.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
018-121. Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Passes 6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Have any of you driven by there lately on Dave
Yeah.
Ward?
Yes.
It's coming on. It's looking good. Next up, we have an ordinance authorizing a personnel change within the Department of Sanitation, and Mr. Hopper has asked that that we suspend the rules, and if it's okay with you guys to add the wage increase for the diesel mechanics.
Yes.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second to suspend the rules and allow the change of salary in the diesel mechanics as well. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Say aye, Andy.
Wait. You gotta say it one more time, hold on.
Wait, no,
Passes 6-0. Can we,
passed with 5, we can't suspend the rules without them.
Okay, well, we've suspended, no, we suspend the rules, we're good. We've done that, all right. Now we're to the ordinance part. Thank you, Andy.
Make a motion to waive the 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3.
Andy,
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 We
wait.
can't suspend the
you
rules.
gotta come back, man. Stand right here.
Where's he going?
Stand right here, man. We let you
We have
stand
an
on the
emergency.
outside.
Yes.
Come to the
We
good
got 2
side.
minutes. Give us 2 minutes of your time, sir.
Emergency.
Hey, Joe, will this one need an emergency clause in order to take effect?
No.
Okay.
No, sir.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. Is that all? You're
We've
good.
got
Thank you,
another
baby.
ordinance coming up.
Which one is it?
Well, we won't be able to waive the readings. We'll have to bring the next one.
What about the next one?
No, it's not. It's for the department change.
Where is he going?
We've
Down
got
the
number
department.
6 is another
Catch him and
ordinance.
see if he can come back.
Yeah.
We need to take care of some
No,
business.
we'll waive the
We've
readings.
got 2 more items and we'll be done.
Yeah, tell him get his old self back in here.
Ma'am?
There's a neighbor that has a.
10 minutes, give me 2 minutes of your time. Y'all wanna go ahead and vote on this one?
And that's got an emergency on the next one,
The
too.
neighbor's house.
I think Mr. Hawkins has an emergency that he needs to attend to.
I say you wanna go ahead and vote this one? on?
Andy, I know you've got an emergency. We're going to move quick. Okay. Okay, we have a motion, so if that passes, I have a motion second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett?
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins? Yes. Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Passes 6-0. All right, next up, we have an ordinance establishing regulations for in creating a residential bulky item collection services for the Department of Sanitation. Mr. Hopper.
I make the motion to waive the 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any
I'm sorry,
opposed?
Joe. Being
Passes
right.
6-0.
You can go if we want to pass with that
You're
emergency
good.
clause.
I think
You're
that's
good.
it,
I think you
yeah.
are good now, Andy.
wait.
No, actually, this is it. You're good.
get in too many steps today.
No, you're good. That was the last one. I know you got an emergency, so thank you for coming back.
Thank you.
Okay, that's all right. So we're not going to have an emergency clause on this, so I'll take, you can explain it now, Mr. Hopper, if you'd like to.
Okay, so we're on the bulky item collection, right? Okay. So this is a service we wanted to provide for a good amount of time. We do get a lot of requests for large items to be removed from households, and we haven't really had the means to do that. And we were able to adjust some of our staffing levels. In fact, I'm not sure the previous ordinance was to reclassify shop foreman to CDL driver, but we also had the issue with mechanics, so I'm not sure which one we voted on a second ago. That probably needs to be clarified.
Yeah.
We've already, y'all already authorized the changes in personnel on B5.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was
Mary-
included, so we're on the bulky
Okay.
items now.
Okay, how about the mechanics?
Yeah, that was in there.
Yes. that was
Okay,
in
okay, I'm
there.
sorry. So, yeah,
It's a
so
little
we were
dicey.
able to, with that ordinance, we were able to adjust, so we would have a driver for the bulky item collection. And,
How often will you be doing the bulk pickup?
so, the way we structured the ordinance right now, residents can call in twice a year, up to 6 items. You know, if it works out to where we can do more, we will. We didn't want to overpromise, so to speak, you know, because we're only going to have one truck for bulky item collection. And, you know, they'll still be able to bring them out to the landfill as they're able to now. You know, couches and chairs and things like that. There's no charge. You know, a lot of
What-
folks don't have the ability to haul those items, so,
Would there
Still
be,
have to, they would still have to take it out to the curb, right?
yes.
They're not gonna like come up to my attic and get the stuff and take it.
No, ma'am.
Nice try.
would there be wood products picked up in this as well, like old fencing if someone's,
No,
None of that.
not construction, no construction debris. It would just be household items.
because I hear people complain that they, you know, if they're taking a section of their fence and replacing it, you know, a lot of them don't have means to take it to the landfill and then pay $30 for
Okay.
a few boards. But I don't know. I mean, I've heard that in the past from people.
Okay, that's
You know,
something we
so-
can. we
And I
can
know
look at.
my daughter lives down in Texas, and they do bulk pickup once a month. And you can put your stuff out there, and they do a section, I guess, different quadrants of the city they do on a certain day of the month. And gosh, it was so nice and, just for people that don't have a pickup truck and
That's
can
right.
take it somewhere, it's really good service, so.
This is going to be, and Joe's been working on this for some time, this is going to be a tremendous benefit for the people of Conway,
Yes.
not only just from helping people who need a hand getting some things picked up, but also from an unsightly as well. Things that sit on the curb for a long time, we'll actually be able to remove those. So I appreciate what you're doing, Joe. This is really going to be a good program for the city.
And maybe we can increase it more than
How
2
this
times a
goes.
year once we
Sure.
see the need and all that, if we have
And
the
we,
manpower.
we did start doing citywide cleanups a couple of years too. That helps as well. I mean, one thing we want to do is try to, reduce the amount of litter and really the larger items. A lot of times we'll see, in fact, the mayor called me one evening about a mattress in the middle of the roundabout there at Salem and Tyler,
Just that-
and, that's pretty common actually. We found couches just right down the road from the landfill that folks just dropped off on the side of the road. So hopefully this will help some of those type of events.
Well, we have big roll-offs at construction sites and people all the time bring sofa and just set it right there next to it, or a mattress, just whatever they want to get rid of, they set
right.
next to it, and you have to
And
get rid of it.
Yeah, this is going to help us because, as we mentioned earlier, we're really going to crack down on litter and in some of our properties this next year to dress
I do
things up.
appreciate, I see your guys down 64 all the time picking
Yeah.
up
Yes, they do.
trash, and I do
do a
appreciate
great
Yeah,
that.
y'all keep 64 looking
Thank you.
good. And Joe's great, his crew, his whole department, I can call Joe on a Saturday and say, hey, someone's dumped something out at a location, and Joe will have someone go out and
That's
take care
great.
of it. So I appreciate the job y'all do.
Work with some great folks. Sure do.
Any other questions?
So will the billing just appear like on the Conway Court bill, or do you have to pay?
Yeah, so
Online,
we're not increasing any fees. The fees that we are charging are for what's commonly called white goods, things like refrigerators and stoves. And those fees were set, I think, in 2013. So we just kept those the same, and we'll just put those on the Conway Court bill.
Do we have a motion yet?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just going to double check.
We have a motion and second. Have we had a motion and second to adopt the ordinance? We
suspended
Oh, we just
we've waived the
suspended.
3 readings. We've not had a
Make
motion.
Motion for
Okay.
adoption, and we can't vote on the emergency clause, is that
Correct.
correct?
But Joe's good with that, he said.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett?
Be 018-123. Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
And Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Passes 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Hopper.
Thank you.
We've already voted on item B7. I hope to see you all Friday, December 14th at 11:30 at the Expo Center for the Employee Appreciation Luncheon.
Do we need to cancel
The next meeting.
council meeting?
Yes, unless you guys want to come Christmas night, okay, you can come ahead. I'm not planning on being here. Is everyone okay with canceling our December 25th council meeting?
Yes.
Now, the people that are up for office, are we having,
Have to be
January
Swearing in
1st.
January 1st, okay. With that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you all. Merry Christmas, everyone.
yeah, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.